My name's Akila Gibbs, and I'm the executive director here. And I see some familiar faces. This isn't the first seminar that we've done on trying to help fire survivors navigate their way through this maze of paperwork and information. And so I'm so glad you're here today.
It's for the recording.
I have the lucky opportunity to do these seminars with another group, the Assistance League of Pasadena, and we have joined together and we promise that we will get you the necessary information that you need. And we're out there listening and we're trying to understand exactly what information you need to guide you through. We also have a program, and I'm pretty sure it's still going on, where we help you navigate one-on-one. So if you're having an issue and you just need a little hand-holding, we have someone, that person has been screened, so they're not going to run off with any of your information. We have vetted them. And so they can help you one-on-one and answer questions. They'll do research for you. So if you need information like that, please contact us at the Senior Center or the Assistance League. I'm so proud to introduce my partner in crime, and we're always on the telephone really meeting to try to come up with ways to help everyone and make them whole again. And that's Ursula Hyman. And she's going to be here. She's navigating this part of it. I get you here and provide the space. And so I welcome her with open arms. So thank you so much. Oh, and one more thing. We have gift cards, $50 gift cards for everyone who came today, grocery gift cards. And you can pick them up at the end of this presentation. And we hope that helps just a little bit to kind of like get you through today. So thank you. Thank you for being here.
Thank you. Yes. I'm going to do this one. Hi, I'm Ursula Hyman, and this is the third of our seminars. The first one was on affordable building, and we may be repeating that one soon, because I know some of you are in different parts of your path on whether or not you're going to rebuild. The second one was navigating insurance, which is a morass for all of us. I also lost homes, so I know what you're going through. And this is the third, and this weekend, well, Friday the 3rd and Saturday the 4th, we'll be doing inventory workshops. You always think you know everything you have, but let me tell you, when you start going through some of these lists we've compiled, you'll go, oh, yeah, I had that weird cheese spreader that somebody brought me from England, or I forgot I had 2 colanders, all of those kinds of things. And I am going to suggest that when you get into your new home, or where you are now, best practices is to once a year at the beginning of the year, take a picture of everything, open every drawer, every cupboard, because God help us if we ever have to go through this again. But if you have that kind of record, it makes this process much easier. I do have the pleasure today of introducing Jeff Prang, the county assessor, and he has brought additional staff with him that I'll let him introduce. But Jeff has been the assessor since 2014. And so he has seen many disasters through LA County, and that has allowed his office to respond with various protocols and know how to handle. But what most of us don't know is, besides how the county handles your assessment, there's a whole big thing called the Revenue and Taxation Code that is a California state law that has significant impact on what they can do. So sometimes he would like to do things. He and I worked together on a piece of legislation earlier this year that didn't go through, that we were hoping you wouldn't have to be assessed on that extra 10% that you might be building on your home. And so there are a lot of things that the assessor might want to do that he's not allowed to do. But he's going to talk about that, and then I've got questions and answers for him, and then we will open it up to the audience. So, Jeff?
Thank you very much, Ursula. Good afternoon, everyone. It's a pleasure to be here. I know what you're probably all thinking, who better to add a little bit of life and excitement into your afternoon than the county property tax assessor. Apparently, the mosquito commissioner was not available. But it's a thrill to be here to join the Assistance League of Pasadena and to offer some information that I hope will be useful to you. We'll try not to bore you with excerpts from the Revenue and Taxation Code. I'll try to define those. But whenever I give a speech, though, I always like to begin with a couple things. I'm going to tell you what my office does, but I always begin by telling you what it is that I do not do. I do not collect property taxes. I am not the tax assessor. The person who collects taxes has a very intuitive title. She's called the tax collector, right there in her name. So just a little tip. If you ever say tax assessor, you're actually combining two separate offices. There's the assessor and the tax collector. We're real estate appraisers. We tell you what your property's worth. We don't tell you how much you owe. So I'm one of, just a little bit of background in my office, just so you have a little better idea of who I am and what I do. I'm one of 3 countywide elected officials. I'm the one that nobody's ever heard of. Everybody's heard of the other 2, the sheriff and the district attorney. My office, though, I oversee the largest local property assessment agency in the United States. I have about 1,400 employees, of which nearly half of them are real estate appraisers. We have a budget of over $200 million, and I'm responsible for valuing 2.5 million real property parcels and business assessments annually that will generate over $20 billion in property taxes, which goes to public schools, county services, cities, and funds things such as roads, libraries, parks, emergency services, law enforcement, hospitals, etc. In a lot of ways, the assessor's office is the most important local government agency because no other government agency can do their job until I've done mine. And if I don't do my job thoroughly and completely, then that means that money that should be going into vital public services is left untapped. So just a quick note about the property tax administrative system. The property tax system is designed for maximum public confusion. So my office is one piece of a complex puzzle, and here's the way it works. So if you buy a house, you record a deed with the registrar recorder. Or if you do new construction, you get a permit from the city. Those deeds and those permits then come to my office, and we determine the market value of the property at the time of transfer. We then turn over that data to a department you've probably never heard of called the auditor controller. He's the one who tells you how much you owe. They assign the tax rates, the direct assessments, special assessments, etc. And then they turn over all that data to yet another department called the treasurer and tax collector. They're the ones who send out the bills and collect all the payments. My primary job is the production of what we call the annual assessment roll, ROLL, which is really just the inventory of all taxable property in the county. And taxable property for property tax purposes includes not only land and buildings, but also what we call business personal property, which includes furniture, fixtures, machinery, and equipment. Although it also includes aircraft, both commercial aircraft such as at LAX, as well as general aviation aircraft, mobile homes, boats, and for some oddball reason, racehorses. And the assessment roll is not just simply the foundation for the property tax system, it's also an important tool that local governments use in preparing their budgets in anticipation of property tax revenues. And then the broader region uses it as a somewhat of an economic barometer as to the health of the local real estate market. I can report that the property values in the county have grown for the 15th consecutive year. This year, property values countywide increased 3.91%, or a total of $82 billion over the previous year. The total value of all assessed property in LA County is about $2.2 trillion, which means that the market value is considerably higher. And something I learned not relatively recently, because I'm a bit of a historian, I learned that they used to pay the assessor with a percentage of the assessment roll. And I was thinking at $2.2 trillion, maybe we should go back to that. But in any event, I'll stop there. That's just a little basic overview of my department and what we do. Now I want to move kind of into some questions that were presented about the fires. So my department was not the most obvious department that is a responder for fire victims, but we are profoundly important to everybody who was impacted. We responded actually with community information while the fires were still raging, because I knew that while people were really just concerned about where to live and how to get their lives together, we knew how important this information was going to be in terms of rebuilding your life. And it's difficult and sometimes obtuse information. We wanted to get out there very, very early. I can tell you that there's about 24,000 properties that we've identified in the burn area. About 18,000 of them have already received reductions in their assessed value based on either a destroyed property or damaged property. Over 11,000 homes were completely destroyed. A couple thousand had partial damage. A few thousand more had experienced smoke damage. Under California law, if your home is damaged or destroyed by a natural disaster such as a flood, fire, or earthquake, you're entitled to property tax relief. If your home was destroyed, we are going to zero out the value on your home. Although we divide property taxes into land and the building. So while the value of the building was removed or reduced, the value of the land typically would not be. Although I will tell you that I did something that no other California assessor has ever done, is we lowered the value on the land as well, because we concluded that because of the toxins of the soil, there was land damage. And we wanted to provide as much relief to property owners as possible. The law says that not only will you have a temporary reduction in your property taxes until you rebuild, but once you rebuild, even if it's 100% new construction, as long as you rebuild to what a standard that we call substantially equivalent, your pre-fire property taxes will be restored, even if it's a brand new home. Because typically, as you know, in California, when you get a new home, you are assessed at market value. Under California law, your property tax basis is prepared if you rebuild. And what I'll talk about in just a minute, if you decide not to rebuild and move, you still have an opportunity to keep your property tax basis. So some questions were presented to me. I'll just run through those, and that may answer a lot of the things that you've been contemplating. So one question is, how much can I rebuild? So, the governor and the county and affected cities have implemented an expedited permit review program for reconstruction projects, as long as you don't build over 110% of the damaged structure. But there's two different standards on how your property would be evaluated. There's the building code standard, which is this 110%. Then the assessment standard is governed under a different set of laws. That's under the Revenue and Taxation Code. And that code says you have to build what is substantially equivalent. And substantially equivalent means roughly the same size and use. So when you rebuild to 110% under best practices by all 58 county assessors, that is not substantially equivalent. That is more than what was there. So, and this is something I'm really wrestling with right now, because I do not want to be nickel and diming people over these assessments for complying with what the state is allowing under building code. I did sponsor a piece of legislation, Assembly Bill 1253. Nick Schultz from Burbank sponsored it, that would have allowed us to align the building code standard of 110% with the assessment standard, so that we don't have to send you a supplemental tax bill for building that extra 10%. But our friends in the state assembly, in their wisdom, decided to kill that bill without explanation. Made me very unhappy. But right now, my staff and I are exploring whether I think I can legally make an interpretation to accept that 110% as substantially equivalent, because I think that's what's in the best interest of the property owners. Another question: I want to use my insurance money to buy a new house in another county. Yes. Can I move my property tax pre-fire rate to the new structure? And the answer is yes. There's a couple of state measures. One is called Proposition 19. This was passed back in 2020. Another one is Proposition 171. This allows you to transfer your property's pre-fire tax base to a replacement property located in a different county. To determine whether or not you'll be able to retain your home's tax base from the damaged property without an adjustment, we will be making a comparison between your LA County's pre-fire market value and the market value of the new home that you are purchasing. If your original home's pre-fire market value is less or equal to the replacement home's market value, your pre-fire tax base will be transferred without any adjustment. However, if the home that you're purchasing is the market value of the one you're purchasing exceeds the one that was destroyed by the fire, there will be an upward adjustment based on the differences in market value. It's actually still a better deal. You're not going to be reassessed on a brand new piece of property. You'll be able to transfer the like-for-like comparison of the destroyed home with the new one, and anything that goes over that will be assessed at market value, so you'll get a new blended rate. Another question, does the answer to the previous question change if I actually construct a new house in a new location instead of purchasing a new one? And no, the same rules apply. Under Prop 19, if you sell your damaged property, you can buy or build a replacement home within 2 years and transfer your tax base to that new property. And as a side, Prop 19 also says that if you're over 55, you can transfer your tax base 3 times. If you're married, 6 times. So once you're 55, your tax base is portable for pretty much for the rest of your life. There's another proposition which I referenced, Proposition 171. This one allows you to buy a replacement home within 3 years after the damage to your original home. There's some slight nuances between these different programs, but generally speaking, you can buy or build a new home and transfer your tax base. Another question, I heard that if you downsize your home, you risk being newly assessed rather than carrying your previous property tax assessment forward. When does that set in at 10% lower, 20% lower? So the answer is if you build a replacement house that is smaller than your home that was damaged or destroyed, your pre-fire tax base will be reinstated, and it will be adjusted downward to reflect the percentage that you made the property smaller. So you will not be reassessed at market value. You'll be able to keep your proportional pre-fire tax base. So here's a question that doesn't directly affect my office, but we're adjacent to it, and a lot of it is because this is based on data that my office maintains. But what should you do if you don't receive your property tax refund? If your property was damaged or destroyed in the fire, you should have gotten a refund on your property taxes. The 2024-2025 annual property tax bill refund would only have been issued if a misfortune and calamity reduction was made in your property. That's due to damaged or destroyed property, and you paid an amount in connection with your second installment that exceeded the reduced tax liability. If that's the case, you can inquire about the status of your refund with the Auditor Controller's Office. But the biggest reason people didn't get a refund is because we don't know where you're at. So typically, your mailing address and the address of your property are the same. You get your tax bill at your home. But if your home was destroyed and you did not update your mailing address, we don't know where to send it. Of the 18,000 properties that received reductions, 60% of those were reduced following an application by the property owner, who typically would give us an address. We proactively reduced the values on the other 40% without an application from the property owner, so we don't know where they are, where they're staying, and the only address we have on record is the one which is maybe at the damaged or destroyed properties. So when the Auditor Controller sent out property tax refunds, over 1,000 of them came back, and they're holding them, waiting to identify where those property owners are. If you've not updated your mailing address with our record, you can do that easily online at our website. And you can change it as often as you need to in order, if you move more than once, you can change that so that you get notices from my office, and if you're entitled to a refund, they will know where to send it. Next question. The square footage of my house on the assessor's website is not correct. When I purchased the house, it said it was 3,000 square feet, and the appraiser measured it at 3,000 square feet, but my property tax bill says it's 1,800 square feet, which is what it was in 1925 when the home was built. If I rebuild to the 3,000 square feet standard, what will happen to my property tax bill? Well, a property owner can complete and submit something we call a property data change request, and you can do those online on our website. And this would trigger a review by my office into the pre-fire square footage of the home. If we can confirm that the actual square footage of the home was 3,000 square feet before the fire, and the owners rebuilt a 3,000 square foot home, we will restore the pre-fire tax base. However, if it cannot be confirmed that the actual square footage of the home was 3,000 square feet, then we would unfortunately have to assess the additional 1,280 square feet as new construction at market value. And then that would be added to the assessment of the rest of the property, that's the land and pre-fire tax base for the remaining 1,800 square feet of the property. And we will take almost any type of information that you can provide us, pictures, et cetera. It doesn't have to be formal legal documents. And forgive me, I should have made an introduction at the beginning. I did want to acknowledge I have staff here. If you ask me really hard questions, I asked Jerry House, who's our Director of Operations. He is lead on our fire response in the office, and he's here to answer any more technical questions. And then Candy Eng is a Special Assistant Field Deputy who's helped put this together. So we have a lot of resources here to help you. Another question. My previous house was 2,000 square feet, but now I plan to build a 1,500 square foot, one a little bit smaller house, and then I'm going to build a 500 square foot ADU. And how will that be treated? So your house, your home's pre-fire tax base will be reinstated up to the extent that it is rebuilt. But you can't build two different buildings and combine those square footage to retain your tax base. The 1,500 square foot home that you rebuild we'll be able to apply the pre-fire tax base to that, and we'll amend it down a little bit to reflect the fact that the home is smaller, but the ADU will be assessed at fair market value. There's no discount on what we call new construction. So now the next question, if I'm building like for like, but I'm adding an ADU, what will happen to my property tax bill? So assuming that you rebuild your home to substantial equivalence, your tax base there will be restored. Let's say you bought it in 1990 for $200,000, and then you decide to build an ADU, and let's say that ADU costs $100,000. Your new tax base would be $300,000. The $200,000 for your original base, plus the $100,000 for your ADU. And the way that we value ADUs, we use a little different sort of assessment methodology. It's called the cost approach, because no two ADUs or new construction are identical. We can't use the market comparison approach. And so we use regional standards for materials and quality to determine what the fair market value of that property is. We'll also probably want to see what you actually paid for it, and try to come up with what we think is the fair market value. Another question, I am considering a lot split. One part is the land, the other part is the home. Assume you rebuild the home like for like, how will the assessment be split? Would the land value just be split in half and my previous assessment for improvements be reinstated on the one half of the lot? Will my existing improvement bill carry forward? So the answer to that, our office would take the original parcel and allocate part of the land value to each of the two new parcels. And then we'd move the entire trended base year onto the new parcel that has the home we call that a parcel change. Next question, what happens if I build a basement? For assessment purposes, is a cellar and a basement different? So building a basement or cellar would be considered new construction, and you would be assessed for that. I don't know that we differentiate between a basement and a cellar, 6 of one, half a dozen of another. But the general rule of thumb, if you're building something that was not there before, that's called new construction, and that's subject to assessment. Another question that was submitted, I'm not sure if it's accurate, says lot values are dropping rapidly, so much of my house property tax is tied into the land value. How do I change that? So I'm not sure that we are able to demonstrate that lot values are going down yet. Right now, we still have insufficient information to really know what is happening with property values. We have to have enough transactions take place before we can really have a good window into what the market is doing in both Altadena as well as the Palisades. But the way that we allocate your assessment, there's an allocation to the land and the improvements. Those have been set at the time of your original transfer. But if you do believe that your property has lost value, there is a law that allows us to value your property downward. It's called a decline in value. And this is a really confusing program. So let me try to explain it. So a decline in value occurs when the current market value of your home, meaning what could it sell for today, when that value of your property falls beneath your assessed value. The assessed value is what you pay taxes on. It is not, a decline in value does not occur when you lose equity. So let me give you a simple explanation. Let's say you bought your home in 1990 for $200,000. And just before the fire, it was worth $1.5 million. But your property didn't burn down, it just had some smoke damage, it's still there. But you try to sell it and you can only sell it for $750,000. So you've lost some value from before the fire. But you did not experience a legal decline in value because your tax base was $200,000. The home is now worth $750,000. So it's not as worth much on the market, but you still have, you're still in the black from what you bought it. You would not be entitled to a property tax reduction based on that standard. But if you bought your property for $2 million just before the fire, and that's what you're taxed at, and now you can't sell it for more than $1 million, you just lost $1 million in assessed value, and we would reduce it accordingly. Does that make sense? It's all based on what your tax base is and what the current market value is. Next question. Once my house is rebuilt, it will have nicer finishes, a better floor plan than my old house. So its market value should be higher than the pre-fire prices. Will you recess because of that? Generally speaking, the answer is no, we would not reassess. We're going to be looking at substantial equivalent. For over 11,000 property owners, their homes were completely destroyed. So you're going to be building a brand new home. And lots of people may add in better quality materials and upgrades to that home. But as long as your home is substantially the same size and use, there will be no reassessment. Next question. My garage didn't used to be attached to my house, but now it will be attached. Will that impact my assessment? Again, no, so as long as the garage is substantially equivalent in terms of size and utility. So let's say that you, in the strange eventuality that you disagree with our opinion of the value of the property, and you think that we got it wrong. How do you challenge that proposed assessment? So if you do have a disagreement, there's a number of things you should do. The first thing you should do is call our office and talk to the appraiser and tell them you think they're wrong and why. And if you have any type of documentation that will support your position, you should present that to us. If the appraiser doesn't agree with you, you can file a formal appeal. It's called an assessment appeals application with the Los Angeles County Assessment Appeals Board. This is a confusing entity because it has the word assessment in it, so everybody thinks it's my responsibility. It's not. The Assessment Appeals Board is a quasi-judicial body appointed by the Board of Supervisors. So my relationship to the Assessment Appeals Board is kind of like the DA's relationship to the Superior Court. This appeals board is a Superior Court, and I'm the DA. And then what would happen is you would go before this appeals board and tell them why you think the assessor got it wrong, and then somebody from Jerry's staff would be there saying why they think you're wrong, and then the appeals board would determine what they think is the right answer. Next question, does adding or removing a pool change my assessed value? That is a big yes, because you're adding something that was not there. So if you build a swimming pool, that's going to be considered new construction, and that will affect your assessment. And I should just say here that when you add new construction and we add an assessment, we don't reassess your entire property. We simply assess what's being added and then add that to your underlying assessed value. So if you had a home that was assessed at $500,000 back in 2000 and you add a $100,000 ADU, your new assessed value will be $600,000, even if you could sell that home for $2 million. We don't reassess the whole property. Another question, I'm installing a solar panel when I rebuild. Will that impact my assessment? Under California law, while we do collect the permits on solar panels, they are exempt from assessments through January 1st of 2027. So you can feel free to add that. It will not affect your property taxes. So those are the questions that I had that I wanted to answer up front. I think we're now ready to go with Ursula and I are going to go to the next stage, and she's going to ask me some more questions, and I hope they will be easy and I don't have to call Jerry up to help me.
Thank you. Those are most of the questions I was going to ask. So. We did have one, oops, mic on. We did have one question that was presented to me in writing right before we started, and that was, there's all these different ways of measuring value, which you talked about. There's the square footage for insurance and contractors and yours. This person's house was destroyed in a fire. She had a finished attic, but at age 78, she doesn't want to have to climb the stairs anymore. So she doesn't want to rebuild it. She said, if I don't, my new house will not be like for like. My insurance adjuster thinks that will jeopardize extended coverage. Not sure what that, but an alternative might be to add space to the original 3-bedroom, 1-story footprint, equal to the attic. Would that qualify to keep my Prop 13? So I guess the question would be, would you deem that to be substantially equivalent?
As long as they're, correct me if I'm wrong, Jerry, but I think as long as if you're just moving the square footage to different parts of the home, if you're taking a 2nd-story square footage and putting it on the 1st floor, if it was 2,000 square feet between the 2 floors before and after the fire, it'll be deemed as substantially equivalent.
And I would think, though, if what you had is just like a crawl space in the attic, which you wouldn't have counted as livable square footage, then you would not transfer that to being substantially equivalent if you added it. Yeah.
I probably should add on this one a couple things not to be confused by, because as I mentioned at the beginning, there's the building code standards and then there's the assessment standards. So when you rebuild, if you do a different footprint, different setbacks, different height, generally speaking, we don't care about that. We are just looking at the square footage, where the house sits on the property and how it's put together. We are less concerned about.
And before I forget, we are filming this. It will be put on YouTube. It will be put on the Senior Center's website. So if you want to go back and revisit any of these questions, especially when you're calling Jerry's office and saying, oh no, but this is what he said, you'll be able to have something to quote. So. On the question about the pool, I understood your answer with respect to building the new pool, but you probably assessed when the person put in the pool, now they're taking it out because it was so damaged. Will there be a drop in assessment because they have removed that pool?
Jerry says yes.
So this is also, he can point back to Jerry when you call him back. Most of the things you showed to make adjustment or contact were online. Many seniors find online, everything doing online, somewhat intimidating in this fire. Are there other ways to contact the assessor's office?
Yeah, everything you do, well, first of all, we've endeavored to put everything that you need from our office online. Virtually any application, any questions you may have should be accessible through the internet. However, you can still come to our office, you can still call us, you can email us. I think we're beginning to wind down our presence at some of the disaster centers, but we still will make ourselves available in person to help handhold people through this process.
Thank you. You mentioned that your office voluntarily lowered land value. Was that for just the burned homes, or was that for everybody in the fire area? And what percentage did you lower the land value?
So the average percentage reduction was between 20 and 30%. And Jerry, maybe you can help me about how far that was applied.
That's a real complicated how we did that. And what
Do you want to?
Sure.
So the adjustments for the land, Assessor Prang mentioned declining value. That's when the total value and improvements just dropped, general market conditions changed. And we do that kind of assessment based on January 1st, which is known as the lien date, and that's what your taxable value is set upon each year. Misfortune and calamity is relief that is very specific to an event tied to a specific date. Not January 1st, it's to relieve, provide relief for damage caused by an earthquake, or a disaster. So in this example, the damage was to the extent that obviously the improvements were gone, and there were so many properties that were involved that it became a supply and demand issue. How quickly are you going to be able to rebuild? If it was a typical misfortune and calamity where it was one house, you're not going to have a problem getting that 2x4 at Home Depot. You're not going to have a problem finding an architect or a contractor. But when you have something to the extent that we saw here, you have thousands of people trying to bid for that same 2x4, driving up the prices, whether you can even find it. You have to clear all the toxic materials off. You have to get permitted. So we knew that there was going to be an issue with time. So what the reduction in land reflects is, if I looked at your piece of property, just the land, the day before, and we assumed it was vacant, with that, and you could build on it right then and there, it has X amount of value. That same property the next day, although it's the same, it may be worth the same in the future, but it's going to take time for all the things we just mentioned to happen for you to be able to get those permits. So the question is, what would you pay today for the same property that's going to be worth the same, although you have to wait 5 years or 3 years, there's going to be time. So that's what the reduction reflects, the fact that a person would pay less for that property given the fact that they can't build on it. That was what the reduction in land reflects.
And Jerry, will the value of that land go back up?
It will go back up.
It will go back up when the house is rebuilt.
Right, and now the question before about, hey, if land values were truly going down, well, you can always file that decline in value, which is a filing on total value. If your land value is going down, we would pull the entire value down of land improvements. That is your typical decline in value filing, and you can always file on that. But the decline in that, but the misfortune and calamity relief is tied to specific event, specific damage, at which point, when that's gone, we will restore the value.
So I should probably put a finer point on that one. The property tax relief is temporary. So we will lower it, but what happens, this falls under a state law called Proposition 8, and it requires that if we lower your assessment, either on the land or the improvements, we are required to reevaluate your property every year on January 1st, as Jerry said, it's called the lien date. So if your property loses value, but it begins to recover, we will restore that percentage that the land is recovered each year on January 1st. This is also what happens when you rebuild. So this is another area where there's a difference between the building code and the assessment standard. So a lot of times from the building code, they don't really measure anything until there's a certificate of occupancy, and that's when the clock starts ticking. For us, the clock starts ticking when you pull a permit. So let's say you've got a permit and you break ground next month, and in January you are 10% completed. We are going to restore 10% of your property tax basis as of January 1st.
And that's really a very important distinction for people to understand in their planning on their building process, that January 1st. So for example, I'm not pulling my permits till the end of January. And I'm doing that on purpose because I hope to be then completed during the year, but at the lien date, I won't be completed.
Right.
Substantial equivalent, I want to go back to that concept because it's very important for many of us who are looking at rebuilding for aging in place. And one of the ideas on that, and a number of you had 2-story homes, and you're now looking at building a single-story home. So it's very comforting to understand that if you are doing that substantially equivalent in square footage, it doesn't matter. You've gone to modern farmhouse and you used to have a 2-story Spanish. That does not matter to the assessor. What matters to the assessor is it used to be 1,730 square feet, now it's 1,735. They're going to give you your Prop 13 tax base back. Am I right on that?
Yes.
It's also important to think about those of you, because this came up before and there wasn't a clear answer, if you're going to reduce the size of your home. And that what we heard earlier in Mr. Prang's presentation was that you will get a proportional reduction. So if your home, substantially equivalent, is only 3/4 the size of your old home, the improvement part will only be 3/4. Remember, your tax bill has 2 parts. Your tax bill has the land value, which will be put back at its pre-fire value by that point once you've rebuilt. But if you build smaller, it'll just be a proportionate amount. And that's an important change because we weren't able to get clear guidance on that before.
Yeah, that was a little bit confusing. And I'll tell you that this fire was so dramatic, it even challenged a lot of our most experienced appraisers to, because we're doing things now we've never done before. We had to really figure out what the law says and how we would apply that. So we had to wrestle with that one just to make sure that we were on right legal grounds.
The question came up between the difference between a cellar and a basement. I will tell you, I still have not figured this out, and every time I talk to building and planning, I have not figured this out. But apparently you're taxed differently on a cellar than in a basement. But as far as you guys are concerned, if it's usable square footage, you're going to assess it, and it'll probably be assessed at cost value, I assume.
Yes, in most cases with new construction, we use a cost methodology.
Yes. So one thing,
They can't hear you and it's being filmed.
Sure. So we look at costs. However, what we're required by law to do is put on the value of an ad. So the cost may equal its value, it may not. If you're doing the work yourself, you may not be charging yourself a profit. That kind of thing. What we do is we look at sales of a home with something versus something without it, and we can see, like typically when people add that extra bedroom, we'll appraise the property. What was it? What is it worth now? The difference is what the market's willing to pay for that ad. So we do value. The example earlier on the swimming pool, yes, we would pick that up as new construction. However, it may not be worth in the marketplace as much as you pay for it. So we do value. We do not necessarily do cost. Although there's a cost approach that can get market value, we do market value.
But you brought up a very interesting, this is an example maybe some of you can relate to. I have a couple of people we're working with as navigators who had 4-bedroom homes with 1 bathroom. And they've decided it makes much more sense to have a 3-bedroom home with 2 bathrooms, but they stay within the equivalent square footage. Would you at all be changing their tax basis?
In that case, we probably would. One, you're adding a bathroom, so you're adding something that was not there, you're moving walls. It may be a relatively de minimis sum of money, but typically the rule of thumb is if you're adding square footage, it's reassessable. If you're not adding square footage, but you're moving things around and adding things that were not there in the interior, that could trigger a reassessment, particularly if you're adding a bathroom.
We're going to open it up for some questions, but I will tell you that what we will also do, and this is pretty important, is in case they don't have all the information here to be able to answer your question, these questions will be downloaded and we'll verify the answers with the Office of the Assessor, and we'll be putting them on the Senior Center and on the ALP website, just in case you guys get these impromptu questions wrong. So questions, yes, the lady in orange.
So you mentioned
Can you
that-
speak up, please? Or,
You
yeah.
mentioned that the land values have been reduced. I'm sorry. My home was totally destroyed, so I did receive the reduction on my second installment. But now that you're saying the land value has been reduced, when will I see that?
It should have already been done. You should have received a notice of assessed value change from us that would have reflected that reduction. We did that in a blanket fashion, so it's already been applied. The likelihood has already been applied to your property.
Let me, can I share? Yeah, so when you received that new tax bill, that took both into account. So that is the new determination. Right there, yes.
So I'm the situation with take away a bedroom, not a bathroom. Just the bathroom would be reassessed to it, but not the whole house, right?
Let me have, there's some nuances there. Let me have Jerry answer that one.
So your question, no square footage has just been added, you reconfigured.
It's 110%, but I'm just taking away a bedroom and bringing in a bathroom instead.
Oh, okay, so I'm not quite sure what you mean, 110%.
That's the expedited building permit where they can build up to 110%.
Right, so you did go build it up to 110 then, you did, okay. So the current law is what the building department does is mutually exclusive to what we do. We're under a different set of laws. So that 110 is, all it's telling you is if you build, say within 110% of what you had, we'll get you a permit quicker. That has nothing to do with your property taxes. So if you go bigger, under current law, we would have to
That's
assess it.
substantial.
It's beyond substantial.
She's talking about moving walls and
So
rooms.
part with now just moving walls, it's pretty much the value that is picked up, that the bathroom would really be a function of that size. And I wanted to point out one more thing, that just because you add, I mentioned earlier with your value, just because you add a bedroom or a bath, it may not have value. So let's say that you have a 1,000 square foot house and you've already got 3 bedrooms in it or 4 small ones. You add a 5th one, it's going to cost you something to do that work. But in the marketplace, somebody may walk through and go, boy, these are really not functional rooms now. They're so small, I'd have to rip these out and reconfigure it. So it may not have value, it may have a negative value. We may not pick it up at all, even though it had a cost. So it depends on the scenario. We'd have to see it and see what the market says about whatever it is you did.
That is the standard that we do all of our approaches. Everything is based on market value, and we have methodologies to get us there.
The lady in purple over here.
So I'm wondering if you could address those of us that are considering not rebuilding, what our property tax implications are in light of the fact that many of us have been advised not to sell our property until after the Eaton litigation is over.
That I can
So
answer.
we'll hold on to the property, we're not planning to rebuild. So what are the property tax implications?
So there's a couple different programs that are available. One of the most easy one is Proposition 19. That says if you are the victim of a natural disaster, you can sell that property and buy a new one and transfer your tax base. I discussed that a little bit earlier during the remarks. There's another program, it's Proposition 50, and the other one is Prop 171, that does not require you to sell that property, but allows you to transfer the tax base to another property. So, Jerry, correct me, what would happen to with the property that they keep that stayed back?
Okay. So the property that stays back, We would transfer your old low tax to the new property, but you still have the old one that's in a damaged state. So under California tax law, there's only a few things that allow us to reassess, and I think none of them have occurred. So what we would do is we would leave your property in a damaged state, and we would also, at that moment in time, look and see what the market value is, and we'd give you the lower of the two.
I'd like to address I urge you to, before we go, I urge you to please talk to your attorney about not being able to sell your property. What they are concerned about is that you're not going to be able to prove how much you lost. But there should be enough comparable data on cost per square foot building that you would still be able to prove that in your claim. So I am urging people to, I know that rumor is going all around. I urge you to please talk to your attorney. The gentleman standing. Can you wait till we get the microphone? Wait till we have the microphone, please.
Yeah, I've had very good response from assessors and getting on the internet, and they set up a phone call and we went back and forth. But I had not heard until I saw a slide up there that said that there is some provision for 5 years to rebuild. I've only heard about 2 and 3.
One is an insurance standard, and one is a building code standard, and the third one is your standard. So that's the problem.
So what you're saying, actually, I understand what you're saying, that in the rebuilding, there was 2 provisions. There is one called, under R&T code, section 70 is called substantial equivalent, and it is one test to test whether what you built is substantial equivalent or just similar or comparable. There's a second one that is based upon value. That's R&T code 70.5, and it's a value test. That value test requires you to build within 5 years. So the other one, substantial equivalent, doesn't matter how much damage there is, doesn't matter how long you take. It doesn't matter bringing it back up to modern day codes, so it's a little nicer in some things. As long as at the end of the day, it's substantially the same thing as you had, a 1700 3.2, you're okay.
But that's different than other law.
One of the choices that my wife and I had was we were looking at knowing it's going to take 2 to 5 years to probably get through the process of rebuilding. We were looking at buying a condominium and then selling that after the completion of the build. Do you think I would be able to transfer the tax basis at that point in time from the original house?
So under Proposition 19, you can transfer your tax base 3 times.
Well,
six times if you're married. So if you were to transfer under Prop 19 to the condominium, you could then transfer it back. I did want to put a finer point on the one element that Jerry talked about, the value test, the 120% value test. The truth is that provision will apply to very, very few people. In order to replace your property using a 120% value test, you're going to have to get that property rebuilt probably in less than a year. We are finding that one place where it might apply, there's some people who are buying homes and they're moving them onto lots. That value test may work for those, but it's not going to work for the vast majority of property owners.
I do want to caution you, though, to make sure you've looked at your insurance policy. With California, your insurance policy probably says you have 2 years to rebuild. California law says that as long as you are making a substantial effort towards that rebuild, they have to give you up to 3 years. But if you can't show that you're going through the process, you've gotten plans, you've started the permit process, and so on, then you could have some problems with your insurer unless you've already accepted a total payout. We have a question here.
Hi, I just wanted to get some clarification on, I understand that the building department is allowing 110%. How are you, as the assessor, looking at that additional 10%?
Which 10%, yeah.
So this is, I referenced this a little bit earlier, so we're struggling with this because assessor's standard is substantial equivalent. And there is decades of guidance from the Board of Equalization, through assessors, as to what substantial equivalence means. Under normal circumstances, if you were to build 10% more than what was there before, we would view that additional 10% as new construction, which is why I sponsored legislation which would have aligned that 10% with and allowed me to accept that as substantial equivalence, but the legislature killed that bill. I am right now working with the Board of Equalization and my staff to see if there is any way that I can get to the point administratively to make a determination that that 110% will be substantially equivalent. I am going to do that unless the lawyers tell me I can't. I'm nervous about doing that because I don't, assessors, we do things the same. If you're in Humboldt County or Imperial County, everybody's measured by the same yardstick, the same laws apply everywhere. So I'm very concerned about doing something, you don't want 58 assessors applying the law differently. So, but we have an extreme situation here. There's a great deal of need. I'm trying to get to the point where I can provide that benefit to property owners as long as I'm on solid legal footing to do so.
Let me put a little finer point on her question. So I think part of the issue for people have been, which part do you count as the extra 10%? Is, if my kitchen is now increased by 4 feet, my bedroom have increased by 5 feet, the bedroom has a whole lot less value than, that fancy kitchen counter. So which 10% are you going to be counting?
The square footage, right?
But, different square footage, as you noted, is worth a different value.
So typically,
Like the bathroom.
how we do it is we have we cost out improvements. That's how we usually use our cost approach. That's just based on an overall dollar per square foot, assuming a kitchen, all of those things. So it's all captured, and we would do it on a dollar per square foot basis for the extra 100 square feet or whatever. And based on your quality class, that type of home, on a dollar per square foot basis, that's kind of how we would do that. And I did want to mention one other thing that rarely gets mentioned is if anybody has commercial property, non-residential, the only proposition available to you, there is one, it applies to you, it is Proposition 50, and that allows you to transfer your base value to a replacement property if it's a commercial or industrial, any type of property.
So for purposes of people who own rentals, they are being considered by the SBA as commercial properties. You can't borrow on them as residential. How does the assessor single-family home count? Is that considered a commercial property, or is that considered a residential property? Do you want to just, I'll see if I can get another chair?
We wouldn't get involved with that type of thing. So we would look at the property based on its use. And if it's a single-family residence, we would look at it in that use. If it's a commercial or industrial property, we would look at it like that, independent of anything else that's going on with it.
Carol. Go right there. I didn't. Oh, I'm sorry. Back here first.
All right, thank you. I just missed Sandy.
I just thought you didn't have a chair.
Mr. Pratt, first I want to thank you sincerely for your presentation here. We got to hear you at the Hilton a couple months ago, but we wish you were able to speak longer. So when we heard you were going to be here, we immediately came. So I just want to thank you and all of your efforts and presentations. It's been very, very helpful. I hope you're able to do another one. I hope you're able to do another one as well. But my question is this. We have not signed with any contractor yet. We're speaking with contractors. We haven't signed up for any litigation with any attorney as well. But we've been going through, there's so many community needs, like including this one, which are very helpful. So my question is, first, is that our home, we purchased back in the 80s, but my parents bought it, we bought it from my parents who bought it in the 60s. So I grew up in the house, we purchased it, we raised our children there, and actually we're in the process of getting it to our children right when the fire started. But our concern now is this, is that we don't have like the blueprint of the house or anything like that. My dad did do some improvements, you know, he's heaven now, he's but like two specific things. We had a back porch which had a door, you could go to the backyard. My dad sealed that door, and he took a washing machine and dryer from in the garage and put it in the house. So that was in essence our laundry room. We want that back. So number one, would that be considered, you know, something different? Would that trigger something? And then number two, we also had a den. It was there when we bought it. It was there, it was there. I'm asking the same question about that because how would I prove that it was always there? My neighbor, and these are Janice homes, my neighbor said that she's in the permitting process. She said she had to prove her den, and she was able to get a copy of an appraiser that she had. And I think that was sufficient. But I mean, my husband here, we're still trying to we try to find an older appraisal. So I guess my point is, how do we prove it? Is there any way to still, and we're under Proposition 13, how do we not get reassessed if we want that laundry room back and we want that den back?
A couple of questions. Do you know if those were done by permit? Because if they were done by permit,
I
then...
would not know. I don't know anything of, you never really think about these things. You just live there, right? I grew up in the house, so no. And my parents never said, hey, by the way.
Second question, on your property tax bill, there is a square footage that is listed for the improvements. Does that square footage, would that number include that den and that laundry room? If you go back, okay, so I'm going to make a suggestion and then you can add on to this. If you go online and you look at your property tax bill, you can see what the assessor's most recent information was on the size of your house. So let's say you knew your house was 2,000 square feet and that included the den. And if it's on the assessor's bill that you had a 2,000 square foot house, then they knew it as well. And so then there won't be any question. Where the question will come up is like one of the ones that Mr. Prang answered is, he used that example of the 3,000 square foot house that was listed only as 1825. Then the documentation has to be things like photographs that you have, that maybe other people took that could show the relative dimensions of the house, or any other work that was done that would be able to demonstrate the size. Do you want to add anything to that?
Well, that's very difficult. If you want to do anything and use anything and everything you can to show that it was there, have you contacted the assessor's office on this? Because we have aerial photos that go back in time that we could also look from above to see the shape of the house. Also, a lot of times,
Google Earth.
When a property transfers, the person who acquires the property acquired and being assessed on everything that was there. So even if we were to add it, somebody was to pay a purchase and you could show it, we wouldn't add it because your purchase price, you acquired everything that was there.
So when her parents transferred the property to her, that would have been reflected at that time?
So if
it was recorded.
If it
was
there,
recorded, we have a lot of unrecorded transfers.
Your assessments reflected that, then that's another argument that could be made that it was already picked up in the transfer.
Perfect. And then just one other quick comment. We've been going to a lot of the attorney meetings, and the one that we went to Saturday, because there was a lot of questions about selling, people wanting to sell their lots. What they said in the meeting, like if you sold your lot prior to the conclusion of the litigation, that you would get a diminished claim because part of that claim would be about rebuilding.
Right.
So if you no longer own, then your claim would just be diminished because you can't claim that you need money to rebuild when you no longer own the home.
Right.
Yeah, it's not quite right.
Only the owner of record can get relief. So if you transfer it, then even to your kids, they weren't the owner on that date. So you got to be careful to talk to your lawyers to make sure you don't make a mistake in sequencing things.
Yeah. I do want to bring up that we have run into substantial problems with people who do buy from their parents or cousins or aunts or uncles, that they complete a transaction but they didn't file it with the recorder. And we've discussed this issue beforehand because we've had a couple of situations where it's gone from generation to generation over 50, 60, 70 years, but it wasn't recorded in the way it needed to be, and so there could be substantial past taxes owed. Those are very specific problems that you should call the assessor on. Carol, I think you had a question.
We live in a common area development that has lots
Here, behind you.
We live in a common area development and it's highly unlikely that it will be rebuilt within 3 years. We are considering purchasing another house in the meantime. What property tax basis would we take, because obviously we'd be buying substantially up from the current value, and what would happen to the homeowners exemption that is on our property tax basis.
From the current value or from what the value was before the fire, when you say you're going to buy up?
So
we don't know.
So if you want to move, and you can transfer your tax base. Again, let's say you purchased your home for $200,000 in 1990. The day before the fire, it was worth $1 million. You can now buy another home worth up to $1 million and transfer that $200,000 tax base to your new home. So your taxes in the new home would be the same as you're paying on the day before the fire at your old home.
So the reassessed value after the fire is just...
Well, then what happens when the condo's built is what she's asking.
Oh, when you rebuild,
What happens
well,
then?
you can under one of our propositions transfer your tax base back to your rebuilt property, although you would give up that assessment on the new property that you would transferred. You can
So you
have,
only get one bite at the apple.
Yeah, only one bite at the apple. That's correct.
Yes, the gentleman here. Right. Right.
Thank you. So to keep our finances as simple as possible, what we usually do, there are two dates on which you pay your taxes. One is before the beginning of the new year, and the other is after the new year. What we do, just to keep it simple, is we pay both of them in the earlier period. Does that fact change anything?
What did on the refund?
It'll affect you getting a refund because that means you paid all of your taxes, and because 50% of the year was following the fire, you'd get roughly a 50% refund in the taxes.
All right, so we would get the same treatment as though we paid the second payment at the time it was due.
I don't quite understand that question. So
you paid your...
So if you paid your taxes for the year we're in last November, and you filed for a tax refund, your refund took into account you still had some land value, but you had no home value. Those checks have been sent out. If you have not yet applied, you can still apply. For this upcoming year, the date of the valuation, the lien date, unfortunately it was January 1, your house still existed. So how are you handling that because you now know the house doesn't exist?
So the fiscal year runs from July 1st to June 30th. So that date in January was pretty much right in the middle of your fiscal year. So
Yeah,
for
that's
half
right.
the year, your property was undamaged. So that first part of the year, your property taxes were paid on the correct amount. The refund would be based basically for the last 6 months, where if you paid in advance, you paid for an undamaged home for the last 6 months and it is damaged, that's what the refund would reflect. For that last 6 months, the fact that you either didn't have improvements or it was worth substantially less.
So we have to apply for that refund.
Yes.
Well, you need to apply for property tax relief under misfortune and calamity, meaning your home was damaged or destroyed. If you've not applied for that, you still should apply
It's
for
a
that.
very simple form, yeah. I'm going to close off questions in a few minutes. We're only going to do about 10 more minutes of questions, and then we'll be around to try to answer some for a few.
Okay. I know you spoke about the permit, it is approved by the end, and we start rebuilding. Okay, what if my permit is already approved, but I don't start my rebuilding until February? Is that going to make any changes?
No, because we're going to look at your house on January 1st. If you hold the permit, you don't do any work till February, January 1st, there'll be no change to your assessment. Then we'll following the following January, maybe you're completely done or partially done, we will apply a partial restoration of your assessed value.
Yeah, that's exactly why I said I'm not going to start building till after January 1st.
I didn't know, but I started that said because of all the dust and everything. That's why I was going to wait until February, which I think is a very good idea. And the second question is, I'm building an ADU also, but I'm not going to rent that out. I'm going to be the one living in it. I'm going to have my son with his family living in the main home. Is that going to create a great impact on our taxes?
You will still be charged for the ADU if you did not have one before. They don't care who's living, well, she would still be, she owned the house, she'd still qualify for the homeowner's exemption.
It was like a garage that I'm converting to a two-story ADU. So what impact would that have?
We're just going to look at the value.
Yeah, you're just going to look at the value of the new construction, which would be the ADU. But you had a garage, so it wouldn't be, you're just converting the garage, so it won't be all new construction. It'll be only partially reassessed, if I've got that right, because you had the square footage. I've been learning a lot about this with you guys.
You're getting very good.
So that's not going to have a great impact on my taxes?
Not a huge impact, no.
Okay, thank you.
You had a question before. Can we get someone who hasn't had a question, please? I'm sorry, we couldn't hear that. Is the speaker
Microphone's
still
off.
on?
How far back do the aerial photos go?
1 year.
Do you know that?
No, but you can always do Google Earth.
I don't know the exact answer to that, but it goes back quite some time.
We've had that service.
For years, certainly more than 5 years. So they go back a ways. No, I don't think anybody was doing it in 78. So
For some reason,
maybe
I
not
have
that far.
one from the 40s, I think.
Well, you mean, when your house was built, like the 1940 house, that's irrelevant. You're trying to capitalize.
Oops, your mic went out.
If the battery's going?
So it's irrelevant?
There are some really old photos. There's historic photos that are from overhead, but those were anomalies. They weren't part of the work that our office did. However, if you find those from those historic periods and they show something that's useful, we can certainly use those.
Yeah. And again, you only need those if what you're trying to prove is that the assessor's square footage is smaller than what you had. Otherwise, they know what your square footage is. So you don't need to go put one more thing on your to-do list if your assessor statement already has the, size that your house was.
I have a couple of questions. I want clarification about the ADUs. Because you talked about ADUs that were would be, for example, taking part of the original square footage of the house, as opposed to an ADU that would be an additional structure. Are they assessed in a different manner?
So the an ADU is an additional structure if it's not built into the house. Some ADUs are built into the house. But if you're building a separate ADU, they will look at it as new construction.
Right, but
and it will be assessed as new construction.
This is the reason why I was a little bit confused, because you had mentioned, like somebody had said, what if I take part of my house and turn it into an ADU? So it's within the original square footage.
Right.
That's one type of it.
Right.
And the other one's completely separate. And I was just
they're both the same. If it's new construction,
is that what they call a junior?
And it's new construction on your property, it is assessed. So go back to his example. His example was the 2,000 square foot house. They built 1,500 square feet. So they thought, oh, I can move 500. And no, but you get 3/4 of the assessment of the value of your house for that original 1,500 because you downsized. And then you would be assessed, though, as new construction for the 500 square feet.
Okay. And the second question I had was about solar panels. That kind of fast. If you had solar panels on your house originally, and now you're rebuilding, and you're saying that as of the January 1st of 2027, which hardly any of us, I don't think, will be done by then, what happens to the assessment for the solar panels?
You are not assessed for solar panels. That's not considered, a solar panel is not considered new construction, so you're not going to be assessed for putting solar panels on your house.
Just replacing what was there.
Yeah, you're replacing what was there. And just choose someone, Candy.
This may not be the appropriate committee for this, but there's been some talk that we are not going to be able to rebuild our fireplaces. Do you know anything about that?
That's a building.
Yeah, that's a building and safety, and we will be having them in another workshop, but we can't answer that question.
I was told if you have had a fireplace, it is considered okay to rebuild. If you did not have a fireplace, you cannot rebuild.
So that now we have to prove that we have a fireplace.
That's what I was told.
So we cannot attest that that answer is accurate, but again, what I urge people to do is look at whatever photos they have online and ask friends and family who have been there for various occasions to find photos taken in your house which can be used to demonstrate with building and safety. And Jeff has something to add. I'm sorry.
There could be one more thing you could try. If you have ever refinanced your home, when you refinance, it's required by law that anything that's government insured requires an appraisal. So you may want to, if you've never done that, it may be worth a call to whoever you went through that process with and see if you take your hand on the old appraisal. Maybe it's reflected on that appraisal.
Oh, good advice. Your mortgage holder should have it.
Question. I'm under the impression that a garage space is not part of the square footage of your home. Is that correct?
That's correct, yes.
Okay, but there were comment was made that the garage assessment would not change if it was kind of like for like or about the same size. But if it's not part of the square footage, why would that matter?
It's a structure.
Like if you had a 2-car garage, but now you need a 3-car garage, will your tax go up even though it's not part of the square feet?
Anytime you're adding square footage, even if it's not the part of the main house, that's going to be considered new construction.
It's an improvement.
It's an improvement. We do keep track of improvements.
Square footage of a house, it's just like the swimming pool. It's not the square footage of garage is not square footage of a house, but it was an improvement. And so it's included in your tax bill. So if you go from, you had a 2-car garage and you build a 2-car garage, then it's like for like and it's not going to change. If you build a 3-car garage, that the extra car part would be considered new construction. The fact that it's not home doesn't mean it wasn't assessed. Like if you build a pool house, it's not home, it's not livable square footage, but it's assessed. Nothing's free. Okay, I think this will be.
Just to follow up on the solar panels, if we did not have solar panels and we are not ready to be rebuilt and install solar panels by January 2027, is there any plan to extend that date?
That's up to the state legislature. We're not involved in the policy of applying those. We're just administering what the law allows.
And then that one, okay.
And what is the solar exemption exactly?
The solar exemption is a law passed by the legislature that says you could put solar panels on without being taxed for making that improvement.
This lady right here. This is going to be our last question. Okay. So this will be our last question, and then we'll have.
My question is to you. I hate to run you back.
All right, Jerry's coming back for the hot seat.
I just want clarification. I have a garage, that's garage, and I'm changing now to an ADU, 500 square feet. And if I understood you correctly, you made the statement that your evaluation only considers part of that. I got confused.
With ADUs, there's many different types of ADUs, and each one theoretically could be different. If you had a detached garage and you convert that, that's one type. If you attach it to the house, that's another type. And some people are actually putting it inside the walls. Each theoretically poses a different question. So if you had an ADU that was from a detached garage, then what we would do is we would take the value of the ADU, but you would get a credit because with ADUs, you use part of the framing and part of the garage. So the stuff that you were able to keep maintains its Prop 13 value. And so let's say that you kept 40% of the garage, then we would only put on 60% of the market value of the ADU. You would get a bit of a conversion credit.
In my particular case,
Oops, it's not on.
the property was completely destroyed. So
No,
I'm
she
trying to
understands that.
understand, it's not like the garage is there.
No, but you're rebuilding. The language is any reconstruction of improvements that were there can get excluded. So if you're rebuilding, if you have an ADU and it's ADU for ADU, you're just rebuilding, you're fine, as long as it's similar. But when you convert a garage, there was not an ADU there before. You're not rebuilding something that was there, you're putting something new, unless it's new construction. However, you're using a lot of the parts of the structure. So it's not like you shouldn't get a credit as if you built an ADU from ground up. You're using a lot of the framing, a lot of the other structure that was there. So whatever that percentage is, you will get a credit and not be paid up before.
Yeah. So in that, I just think about it being the substantial equivalency part, right? So it was substantially equivalent that you had a garage, so that part keeps the Prop 13. Now the improvements, because you're making it an ADU, that's the only new part of the construction. The old part is substantially equivalent. Now if you increase the size and stuff, it gets more complicated. We're sorry that we're going to have to cut this off. I want to thank Jerry and Mr. Prang and all of your careful attendance. Again, this will be posted on YouTube and it will be posted on the Senior Center website. And I just want to thank everybody very much for coming and your attention.